there's so much riding on these visits from a British government point of view, from a constitutional element, that the fact that the king has had to deal with that going on back at home must be deeply aggravating that it's happened now.
And
he's suing the King's court,
government.
He's suing the King's
His Majesty's government
in His Majesty's courts. Should we start with today and go backwards?
Yes, it's been a very full-on busy day. 20th wedding anniversary. Charles became the first British monarch to address both Houses of Parliament in a joint sitting. With a very important speech where he packed a lot in, didn't he?
Everything. Certainly did. 22-minute speech. Made a little bit longer because everyone was clapping so much, and spontaneous standing ovation halfway through, which I thought was rather interesting.
He got a lot in there. There's a lot about ties between Italy and the UK, cultural ties, historic ties, economic ties. The fact that we stand with Italy in our solidarity with Ukraine.
Bit of a joke.
There's a bit of a joke.
He thanked the Romans because it was their idea to put the king's head on coins.
Yes.
So he said thanks for that. Quite likes that.
He talked about the romance of the city and how touching it was to be there with the Queen on their 20th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
But all of that tied up really goes to the very heart of what they're trying to achieve on this trip, which is what, Kate?
Well, he said, didn't he, that he had one mission essentially for this trip, and that was to strengthen the ties between the two countries. In a post-Brexit world, he talked about both countries being European, made a bit of a thing of that. He talked about shared interests when it came to supporting Ukraine. He talked about shared culture, shared defence. There was a reference to the Prince of Wales flagship
carrier ship,
aircraft carrier, which of course is going out to the Mediterranean to take part in a defence exercise alongside the Italian Navy. And we've seen that tie in all week. We've seen the fly past with the red arrows from the RAF and their Italian counterpart over here flying through the skies over Rome. We've seen even military bands, so the Welsh Guards band was playing alongside an Italian military band outside the Colosseum. That, the symbolism of this trip couldn't be clearer, could it? It's all about defence. It's all about let's stay together and
cozying up to our European friends in a post-Brexit landscape, isn't it?
And with threats near to our shores, essentially. So it was interesting this morning, wasn't it, when he met Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni?
Yes.
What did you make of that?
Well, they had a real love-in. It was actually his first official meeting with her.
That's right.
And he arrived at the amazing Villa Doria, which is not her residence, it's not her checkers, but it's just somewhere she gets to host people. It was rather magnificent, sort of ceremonial welcome with all the kind of cavalry there. And then they had a lovely wander around the gardens. There was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of chatting, a lot of kind of shared interests in terms of gardens, architecture, all of that.
She's Italy's first female Prime Minister, and she's normally quite tactile, and I think the genuine affection seemed to be between the pair of them.
Great shots of them laughing. But what's interesting is we had a briefing with the ambassador here, didn't we, the other day, Ed Llewellyn, and
right at the start of the week.
Start of the week, and he came and he had a little chat to us, and he said, what the King and Queen will do during this visit is intangible but priceless. And I think we've seen that play out over the last couple of days with, Charles meeting Giorgia Meloni today. Both of them meeting the President Mattarella yesterday.
And his daughter.
And his daughter, all of that. And I think Charles today in Parliament, as well as mentioning all those things you just touched on, he reminded Parliament and Italy how long the relationship goes back, this being his 18th visit here.
Yeah.
So it was very much like, we've been friends for a very long time.
Yes.
This is I'm here again as king and with Camilla as queen.
Yeah, and echoes to a lot of the chat that he had, or the speech that he gave in Germany as well, this idea that long friendships, we've seen each other through good times and bad, really kind of reinforcing that idea that we're in it for the long haul.
Yes.
Do you think?
Yes, I do. Now tonight, another big night, nothing says happy 20th wedding anniversary, darling, like going to a state banquet, putting on your black tie.
Dinner for two, not quite, as the king says himself tonight.
And it's happening just there at the Quirinale.
Just over yonder.
They'll be arriving any minute now. And again, it's another big set piece. What's the aim of a state banquet, Kate?
Well, this is a bit more fun. This is the kind of glitz and glamour of it. We know Andrea Bocelli is going to be there. It's a chance for the king to make a more light-hearted speech to the one that he gave a bit more serious in Parliament today. And I think he'll draw on, well, we know we've had a kind of briefing, haven't we, of what he's going to say, which is that he's going to, again, make the joke about the candlelit dinner for two, not quite, and talk about the ties that bind, essentially the fact that we're together, the unity between the two countries, make a few gags.
Always a few
Tell
gags
a few
for Charles.
jokes, and especially at the state banquet is a chance for a bit more of a light-hearted touch. I think a bit more fun.
And
bit
he's
more
even
friendly.
got Monty Python in there.
He's got Monty Python in there. He talks about that great Monty Python sketch about what did the Romans ever do for us? Oh, well, they built the roads and they did this and that. No. Oh, but yeah, but apart from that, what did the Romans ever do for us? And he says he doesn't agree with that. He thinks that Romans have been marvellous, but he says that the Italians have actually gone further than the Romans in that they touch every part of the British Isles. They've got, getting a bit windy up here, they touch every part of the British Isles. We have big kind of Italian community, strong community in the UK. It's reversed over here as well, particularly with tourism, lots of Brits coming over here for holidays.
Yes.
And it's just reminding everybody, our defence powers aligned. We're neighbours. That we're talking about trade, how we trade together,
and all going on in the background.
What we have in common.
We know that David Lammy's having lots of different bilateral meetings off the back of all these sort of big set pieces behind the scenes. David Lammy is meeting his counterpart and having conversations about trade, about all sorts of other things, about defence. So he's here with them every sort of step of the way. We saw him at the reception last night.
And he was there at Parliament today, of course. Yeah.
But so it's almost like the King and Queen and the kind of the figureheads doing some really important kind of in front of the scenes work, and then David Lammy behind the scenes is trying to kind of manoeuvre and do the kind of work on behalf of the government, with our counterparts here.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's the royal family, kind of that soft diplomacy, that soft power that you talk about. It's kind of greasing the wheels of this kind of bigger machine of military might, of how we're going to work together, and those cogs. And behind the scene, those cogs are turning more smoothly, perhaps, because of the visit. And it's not just about nice words at state banquets and fly past and things like that. That there's a very serious element to it, and a lot of the negotiations in the months preceding the visit have gone on as to what each country wants to achieve from the visit. I thought it was really interesting actually in his speech today that he didn't pull his punches, Charles, when it came to the environment. Now this is par for the course with Charles. We know he talks a lot about the environment. As he says himself, he's been banging on about it for decades.
Yeah.
But Giorgia Meloni, of course, has been a little bit sceptical on that front when it comes to European targets for climate change and things like that. So I wondered whether that was him just sort of laying down, getting his points across that he would like to get across on the environment side of things. What did you think?
Well, I wonder I'd be intrigued to know if that came up in the private conversation, because of course we know everything that looks sort of very fun and jolly in front of the cameras. Behind the cameras we don't always hear exactly what's been said. And
they retired for a private meeting today, and again we were not sure what was said in that. There wasn't a readout actually either about, normally we have the kind of fond words exchanged, but from the outside it did look like they were getting on very well. Yes,
and he mentioned today in the speech, and he mentions tonight as well, he's looking forward to they're both going to Ravenna tomorrow, and tomorrow's going to
be... So are we.
And so are we. A very early start on the train to Ravenna tomorrow morning at dawn. Tomorrow's going to be very much about cultural ties, the history of that area. We're going to see Dante's tomb. There's going to be a visit to the Byron Museum. Of course, Byron spent a lot of time here. Rogue that he was, very inspired by Ravenna. And there's going to be a lot of focus on traditional cuisine from there, and that will be the last day of the trip. I think that'll be lots of great pictures there, maybe a bit of a lighter feel. What do you think?
I think, ending on a bit of a high, a more kind of, we've been told there's going to be food stalls, there's going to be whiskey.
Sign me up for that.
Whiskey and Parmesan pairings.
Pairings.
So I think it's
that
only our duty
pairing.
to try
Sample.
that one out.
We'll report back, listeners.
There's also going to be a different element tomorrow, I think, in terms of the touching on the Second World War and us and Italy being allies, and a reference to, historic events. So they'll talk about how the Canadian troops came in to liberate Ravenna during the war.
And he mentioned that in speech today, didn't he, as King of Canada? That's going to be an important moment for him tomorrow.
And King of Canada, of course, is an important role, particularly amid Trump's trade tariffs at the moment, and him being seen to stand up for Canada. I mean, Canadian and British flags have flown in Ravenna for a long time now. And I think that's, testament to that he'll talk to that relationship as well. So it's not just the kind of connection with Italy. He'll be talking about Canada. He'll be meeting some Canadian veterans, and I think that'll play into what he's here to achieve.
Now, this trip, as we know, because we talked about it last week, has come off the back of a bit of a health scare for the king. Because last week, of course, we were told very last sort of late one evening that he had side effects from some cancer treatment and had gone to hospital, had spent a bit of time there to recover, and then he'd come back. And there was discussion about, would the state visit go ahead? We were told it would. But I think almost in a way, the postponement of the Vatican element of it has probably helped a little bit in terms of spreading out engagements over a few days and making the agenda slightly less heavy, although there's 17 engagements, I think in total it's been quite full on.
Yeah.
How do you think he's looking? How do you think he's coping with it? How do you think they're managing it, given that...
His lips look quite sore. We've been told that he had treatment at the weekend so that he could
Just
then
before
come
he
out.
came out.
Yeah, so that he could come out here and do that week without having the week interrupted by his sort of weekly treatment. So I wonder if having two courses close together, was difficult for him, but he looks jolly in himself, I have to say. He seems like he's on good form.
Yeah.
He stood on his feet, like I say, for 22 minutes in that chamber today and didn't seem to tire at all. And that is quite an ordeal for anybody to deliver a speech like that in those circumstances during a very busy day. He'll be on his feet again tonight at the state banquet. And I think in and of himself, he looks jolly. He looks like he's on good form, but you can see he's tired. I think you mentioned it last time we spoke.
Yeah, I mean, he last night at a reception, he and Camilla were at a reception with British members of the sort of British and Italian community here, and again, he definitely was taking time to make sure he spoke to as many of the 150 guests as he could. But at the end of a long day, he did look a little bit tired. But I suppose 76-year-olds, we've talked about this, going through cancer treatment every single week with quite a heavy workload and not really making any sort of extra space, that's to be expected.
Yeah. Well, he's got something to look forward to at the end of the day, because Camilla says that she's going to be presenting him with a personal gift. She said they had an afternoon catch-up, which seems a very formal way of saying she was able to finally have a chat with him, because on this day of all days, despite it being their anniversary, they split up, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
He went off to see Maloney. She went to see a school and talk about their literacy projects and meet some of the children. And it was only later they came together at the Parliament.
The lovely thing we've heard from Camilla today is that Camilla has been talking to the UK media with her.
Yeah.
And we've been asking her what's the secret to the marriage and the long enduring marriage. It's a relationship that's gone on for much longer than the 20 years of marriage. And she's given some quite interesting answers, hasn't she? She said...
What's the secret, did she say?
Laughter, give and take.
Friendship.
Yeah. And, and also she sort of made a joke about the fact that they're always doing this. We're
doing this as in engagements.
We're doing our wedding anniversary and we're doing lots of engagements.
She did say it'd be nice to have a day off, but that was never going to happen. That's what she said.
They're going to sort of mark their wedding anniversary properly when they get back. But she has bought him a present, hasn't she?
Yeah.
What is the 20th anniversary in sort of tangible stuff?
Yeah, it's a China anniversary, isn't it? When you get to 20 years.
What do you think
she says she's bought him some china, but she didn't say what. Maybe it's a mug that says "Best King Ever" or something.
Friendship forever. That's what. Nothing says "I love you, darling" like a China mug that says "Best King Ever" EVA. I reckon that's definitely what she's got him.
If destroyed, still true. I really hope so. But we know that the royal family like to get each other silly presents, so maybe it is something kind of fun and light-hearted like that. She couldn't really tell the British newspapers when she was earlier on, because we probably would have given the game away and ruined the surprise for him.
When they get back home, they are going up to Burke Hall, which is what their friends always say is the residence, the home, and they've got a few, that they feel is most like their marital home together. They both absolutely love Burke Hall up at Balmoral. So I think possibly there as well they'll put
retreat
down tools and retreat and really reflect on 20 years of marriage.
Well, I think a really good gift back to Camilla, and it was proposed to her today, would be for the king perhaps to slow down a little bit, take it easy. And her response was, dream on.
Dream on. Dream on.
Dream on.
Well,
she knows. I mean, I think that's a thing to a good relationship as well, isn't it? It's sort of
she knows them.
Know
the
your
battles.
limits. Yeah. Choose
Know
your battles wisely.
Exactly.
And there's just some she's not going to win, like that one.
Now, this state visit has actually come after what was quite a tricky end to the week last week for the king, because the king unexpectedly was drawn into the scandal around Prince Andrew, the alleged Chinese spy, with new stuff that came out in this tribunal last week. And there was a suggestion in some of the witness statements and stood up that the king had actually been more involved than we knew. So
embroiled
was the front pages, and it did make all the front pages.
And dragged into.
So remind us, Kate, about Prince Andrew, the alleged Chinese spy Yang Tenbo, and how the king was embroiled.
So there's a man called Yang Tenbo who's a Chinese businessman who's an alleged Chinese spy. So the British
government thinks he is, don't they?
That's right. So the British government decided to ban him from coming to the UK on the grounds of national security. He was known initially in court documents as H6.
Yes.
When he tried to appeal that decision, part of his reference for wanting to stay is, I'm an upstanding member of the community, and I did all this work with the Duke of York. So Duke of York, alleged Chinese spy. Story went nuts at the end of last year, and so we move on. However, there's been an appeal.
At the time, Buckingham Palace sought to do their very best to distance the king from the Duke of York and the Chinese spy, and sort of knowledge.
Despite the fact that, as we revealed, the alleged Chinese spy had been into Buckingham Palace twice.
Yes.
Very much at the heart of Andrew's work. He was involved with Pitchet Palace. He had started a Chinese arm of Pitchet Palace. And the word palace, that he's been to the palace, it was not great PR for the king. He was so cross about it that Andrew was advised, perhaps don't come to Christmas dinner. So it was
Banish
a huge
from Christmas.
thing.
Yeah.
And now we've been appealing to try to have some of these documents that were previously not made public, and they have been revealed. And among them are a witness statement by a man called Dominic Hampshire, who is Prince Andrew's aide for a long time, actually was an equerry to the Duke of Kent a long time ago, and who has been involved in a lot of these business deals with Yang Tenbo. For reasons known, I think, only to Dominic Hampshire, he decided to deliver a witness statement in support of Yang Tenbo trying to overturn his ban to get into Britain.
Which seems unlikely.
Which seems like a strange idea, given that at that stage he already knew there was a red flag from the Home Office that this man had. There were question marks over whether it was a good idea for national security in Britain for him to come to the country. So despite all this, Dominic Hampshire thinks it's a good idea to do a witness statement saying he's an upstanding chap and it's all fine. And, he says, I might be a bit of a naive idiot to think this, but lays out his story, and in doing so, he says that the king has held a meeting with Andrew to discuss the Eurasia Fund. Now, this is part of a business agreement that was associated with Yang Tenbo. Now, the meeting wasn't about, it wasn't a meeting between the king and Andrew about the Chinese spy. It was about the fund and how Andrew was going to fund his lifestyle. This was all the conversation last year, because the king wanted to cut him off, and indeed did cut him off financially. Wanted to find out where he was going to get his money from. The keeper of the Privy Purse was involved because they didn't want Andrew to get his money from dodgy sources, which would have led them into difficult waters PR-wise. And yet here we are, and it's Andrew again, and coming just as they start the state visit here.
It wasn't really the headlines they wanted. It forced a response from the palace, didn't it? To sort of say on the record, well, yes, he did hold these meetings with his brother, but these meetings were really just to sort of discuss how he might, what opportunities he might explore. There was no mention of Yang Tenbo.
Maybe the Eurasia Fund was mentioned.
Might have been a mention of the Eurasia Fund.
But we weren't talking about your friendship with the alleged spy.
But it brought him closer to the actual, it brought him closer to the matter than Buckingham Palace had ever wanted, because they'd tried to put him at a real arm's length from this when it broke last year.
And I think you're right to say that, I think, about the on-the-record statement, because people listening outside of this weird world of royal reporting might think, well, what's wrong with that? But actually, an on-the-record statement on something like that is quite rare. The palace sort of moves in mysterious ways, and they might guide, or they might say something off the record. But for them to come out and say something on the record, I think is pretty strong, and it shows you how worked up they were about all this. And they're right to be, frankly.
It feels like there might be more to come out from that. I mean, every time there's a new tranche of court documents, more things come out. So watch this space on that, I think. But it hasn't been the only tricky thing for the king this week, has it, Kate?
No. And I do feel sorry for the king. Here he is. He's had cancer treatment. He's out here doing his best delivering all these speeches, and we just discuss all the things that are going on. But apart from the Andrew, there was the other Duke of Hazard, as he was once told to me.
The other spare.
The other spare, Prince Harry, who is back in London attending a court appeal.
First day he appeared in court was the first day of the full day of the state visit.
Yeah.
So to remind listeners, this is the long-running legal battle that
over 3 years.
Over 3 years that Prince Harry has had with the Home Office. He's trying to overturn the decision by the Home Office and Ravic that his security, his taxpayer-funded security should be downgraded, and he doesn't get it automatically round the clock when he comes here. He gets a sort of bespoke service. He argues that the threat level to him is the same as the sovereign son, as the sovereign son
still
who's
the king's son,
served in Afghanistan 2 tours. So there was a latest round of this. This is the final throw of the dice, as it's being described, because in February he lost at the High Court. The High Court ruled against him.
Yeah,
they said
February.
It was lawful for that decision to be made by Ravic and the Home Office. He's won permission to appeal, so we're hearing 2 days now. Today was the second day.
It means so much to him. He's actually flown over for it, even though he's not sort of speaking.
No reason for him to. He's not in this. He's not on the stand. He's not. He's obviously submitted witness statements. But the optics of that, of him flying over from America, he didn't see his father. He arrived in the UK before his father came to Italy.
There was an overlap, so there could have been a meeting, but there wasn't.
There wasn't. Yep. And I suppose people could argue if he'd wanted a meeting, he could have come a couple of days earlier. Who knows what his schedule is? But it's made a lot of headlines. It's made a lot of coverage while the King is over here with the Queen on an official business. Traditionally, the protocol normally is that other members of the royal family go dark, so to speak, when someone's overseas. I guess Harry would argue...
on such an important visit.
Yeah, Harry would argue he doesn't set the court dates and he's no longer an official working royal. But it's that sort of friction, isn't it, with what's going on over there, what's going on over here, and right at the heart of it, Harry's security, which, as we know, we talked about, he had been very keen for the King to try and intervene on that judicial process, and the King
that's
won't do it.
This is a case where you would think this is Harry in his issue with the Home Office saying, look, you got the law wrong. You know, I should be allowed states who've sponsored security. My risk hasn't changed. That's one thing. But he has, a bit like Andrew, he's dragged the King into it because he has made it quite clear that he thought the King should have intervened to give him that protection, that he should have had a say and said Harry deserves that protection. The King didn't do that,
and people close to the King have said he couldn't possibly, because it's a judicial
it's not
process.
his job to do that, and it's not. You know, he shouldn't be. How can he possibly be interfering with royal security when it's something that to do with the Home Office and all that sort of stuff? So he's dragged the King into it. You know, regardless of that. And I just think these state visits, you know, it's not just here for kind of shake a few hands, the grip and grin, say a few nice words. I think there's so much riding on these visits from a British government point of view, from a constitutional element, that the fact that the King has had to deal with that going on back at home must be deeply aggravating that it's happened now.
And
he's suing the King's court,
government.
He's suing the King's
His Majesty's government
in His Majesty's courts, and has dragged the King into it in another way by saying he should have and could have intervened.
And him coming to the UK when he did this week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, has reminded everyone that he hasn't seen his father
a long time
since last February, when Charles revealed he had cancer. Harry, of course, made that sort of 24-hour dash back to the UK and saw him, but he has not seen his father, who is 76, who has cancer, since last February. There he is in the UK. Here's the King.
He did want to see him when he came last May for the Invictus Games, but he was told
for one reason or another it didn't happen.
You know, the King's diary was full.
Yeah. Anyway, it's on it rumbles.
The Dukes, the spares, continuing to be a headache. In Charles's reign.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that they call him Carlo here.
Carlo.
King
Ray
Carlo.
Carlo.
We should just take that up in Britain. I think that would be
We'll
good.
take it back with us. And finally, Kate, we mentioned briefly last week that we were going to be facing some stiff competition and some new competition in the Royal Podcast sphere.
Quaking in your boots, Roya?
Well, we got our first taste of it this week with Meghan's new podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder. Have you listened to any of it, Kate?
I've listened to some snippets. I haven't listened to the whole thing.
Well, I listened to the whole episode
yesterday.
yesterday.
And I had my hair to wash. and I had all my work to do. Go on then.
Our producer is chuckling.
You are here to tell the tale on behalf of us all. You took one for the team this week, I think it's fair to say, Roya.
I did listen to all
on,
of it.
What's your take? What's your
so
thought?
that I could talk to you in the know, Kate. As you were washing your hair, I could speak to you in the know about listening to all 40 minutes of that first episode.
40 long minutes.
Well, she did an interview with Whitney Wolfe Herd, who's the co-founder of Tinder and the founder of Bumble.
A big deal.
Very successful dating apps.
Very rich woman.
She's a billionaire, billionaire friend of Meghan's. And it was supposedly all about sort of how you set up your business. But actually it went off tangent and off piece, and it was about family life, the pressures of being a working mother, the pressures you feel. Meghan talked about the pressures she felt launching as ever her new range. Whitney talks about how they first met. There were a few interesting revelations. Meghan revealed she had suffered from preeclampsia after she had one of her children.
Postpartum preeclampsia.
Postpartum preeclampsia, and so had Whitney. So they talked about that. There was quite a lot of Whitney saying, you are the most scrutinised woman in the world. How do you do it? Well done. How have you survived?
Aren't you marvellous? Yes, I'm marvellous. Aren't you marvellous? Yes, I'm marvellous. I would have liked a bit more content to lure me into actually. Was there much more content in it other than them blowing a lot of smoke in each other's direction?
Well, I think if you were wanting to set up a business, and would it have given you any helpful tips? I don't think so. But my feeling is possibly that perhaps this is not what that podcast is about.
What is it about? It's about Meghan.
Kate, the one thing I do think she's learned from Archetypes. The last podcast series for Spotify, of course, Spotify cancelled that deal. Although Archetypes did very well, it drew in millions of listeners. I think she has read a lot of the stuff around that, and a lot of people critiqued that, saying we heard too much from Meghan and not enough from the guests. You do hear a lot more from Whitney on this, but
so I've read that she's quite a good interviewer in it.
Confessions of a Female Founder. It was really, I felt it was really more about each of them saying, we've had a hard time, things have been tough, well done,
gotta keep going. Keep going. It's quite inspirational, I suppose, but in terms of kind of tangible tips, perhaps not so much.
Not so much tangible tips, more about their life experience.
Right.
But again, I thought the timing of that was interesting. The first episode dropped yesterday, first day of the state visit.
Although that would have been planned for a long time in her defence.
Yes, it would have been planned for a long time. But again, it's been a right royal week of it.
Hasn't it?
Royal week of it, hasn't it, Kate?
Every week's a right royal week, isn't it, at the moment? We've got one more day to go until home time. Well, it's been lovely talking to you in Rome, Kate. Look at this view. I mean, we've seen the sun go down here, haven't we, while we've been chatting. Probably time to go and have a glass of something.
There'll be some champagne, some Prosecco,
strong.
Some Chianti being uncorked over there at the Quirinale.
Yeah, well, we'll get to see what's on the menu soon, I think.
Shall we hot-foot it over there, see if we can catch a bit of tiramisu?
Let's do it.
Until next week.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.